This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Hey everybody, I want to give a quick sorry not sorry for the civics lesson and public policy discussion rather than a history lesson. I just wanted to get ahead of that right now before people complain in the comments about, I thought this was step back history, not step left, blah. But yeah, healthcare is super important and I was coming up, so whatever. Stop me if you've heard this before. America's healthcare system is the most expensive per capita in the world. If that is a surprise to you, oh boy, you're in for a video. But yeah, the United States spends about 17.8% of its budget on healthcare, while the rest of the world only spends between 9 and 12%. And as you've likely heard, they don't exactly get a whole lot for it. In a recent study of 11 of the richest countries and their healthcare outcomes, the United States was dead last. Out of the 11 richest countries on Earth, they have the lowest life expectancy, and because it's a private system, it has stark inequality. Those who don't have the money to afford expensive healthcare plans or jobs that provide health insurance do not get very good healthcare because they can't afford it. This disproportionately hurts people who are poor, people who are working class especially, which means that it especially hurts women, it especially hurts people of color, and it especially hurts LGBTQ plus people. You know, just want to get those anti-ID poll leftists mad at me too. So America's healthcare system is completely busted. What do? I've taken a look at the plans of the 4 presidential candidates who actually matter anymore, and let's just say they fall into 3 camps. One is bad, one is not great, and one is basically what we should go for. So we're going to talk about the public option, Warren's plan, and Sanders' plan, and then come back to why Sanders' plan is right. Sorry, you're not gonna get me to play a false equivalency with this one, friends. So the first one we're going to talk about as a solution is what Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg are going for. This is what Medicare for all who want it means. It's called the public option. Now, this is something that was thrown out when Obamacare was getting pushed through government back in 2009, but this is a system where you would create a government company that would provide government health insurance that you can pay into. What it would do is, because it doesn't have the same profit motive, that it could keep prices down so that there was always something that someone could buy into at an affordable rate. The problem is an organization like that is not universal, doesn't cover everybody. There's nothing that gets everybody in the program. On top of that, it'll still cost money at the point of use. And though it might try to use market forces to try and lower the price of healthcare, it's not really going to make healthcare something that is affordable and easy for everyone. Also, because it's not a universal program and really not everyone will buy into it, then it's an easy program to become a political target. The government healthcare system could be gutted, could have its budget cut, could be privatized by a future Republican or even Democratic government. So what you're creating is a half measure that is extremely vulnerable to being taken apart. Elizabeth Warren has a plan that goes a little bit longer. The idea is to start with a public option that also includes a bunch of price controls and expansion on common medicines and things like that. But then by the 3rd year of the Warren presidency, there would be a move towards a public healthcare system, a true Medicare for all system, the one that everybody wants eventually. Here's the problem with that idea. And the main thing is, the Warren campaign's Medicare for all system would happen in the 3rd year of Warren's presidency. What's going to be happening in the 3rd year of Warren's presidency? And during the midterm elections, it's fairly typical that the president's party loses some seats. As well, the president will be gearing up to participate in the next presidential election, which means that anything that costs a lot of political capital, something that will be a hard fight in Congress, is going to be a hard sell because a lot of senators and congresspeople are going to be worried about getting them votes. So if you want to do something big and hard like a healthcare system, you really want to do it early while you have a lot of goodwill, because you'll be spending a lot of political capital in order to do it. A lot of people, and not just myself, have interpreted this to say it's a way for her to say she wants a public healthcare system, but it's also a way to say that when she doesn't do a public healthcare system, she can blame the Republicans or she can blame somebody else for why she didn't pass it. At the same time, she can also say that her plan is much slower and much more gradual so that health insurance companies, especially health insurance lobbyists, don't feel as threatened by her presidency. It's a cop-out, essentially. But really, the United States needs to move to a Medicare for all system. A true Medicare for all system. The rest of the world has already moved towards a healthcare system, some a very long time ago, or are approaching it at a very quick rate. Yeah, there's actually going to be some history in this. The first country to get a public healthcare system was actually Germany in the year 1881. That was followed by a primary healthcare for some parts of the population in the United Kingdom in 1911. Followed quickly by the Russian Empire in 1912. After the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union put in a public healthcare system in 1917, but it did take until the late 60s before they could expand this system out into rural areas and become a truly universal program. But the big wave of public healthcare started to happen in the 1930s, as people started losing the ability to take care of their own medical needs because of the Great Depression. So many countries in Western Europe developed public healthcare systems in the 1930s. Again, many of these were government health insurance programs, but might not have been larger, overarching, universal, solid programs like most of us have today. But then World War II happened, and after World War II, when all these countries around the world were rebuilding themselves to figure out what a new, bold world we'd go into, there was a big resurgence in social democratic parties and democratic socialists running in a lot of these countries, and they were able to push and agitate and fight to make public healthcare systems for their countries, beginning with New Zealand in 1941, but shortly followed by the United Kingdom, Sweden in 1955, Norway and Iceland in 1956, Denmark and Japan in 1961, Finland in 1964. Canada, being Canada, is very decentralized and rolled out public health care basically over a period of a decade in different provinces from 1962 to 1972. Italy got public health care in 1978, South Korea got it in 1989, Taiwan and Israel got public health care in 1995, and Thailand got public health care in 2001. But that is nowhere near the end of it. In the 2000s, many countries, especially in Africa and Latin America, have developed a lot of their public healthcare systems. Even China has a public healthcare system. We're pretty much at the point, with one notable American exception, that the entire industrialized world has a public healthcare system. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick break to talk about this video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. Skillshare offers thousands of inspiring classes for creatives and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. I always thought that Step Back was a place for lifelong learners, people who finished university but still wanted to learn more and more and more. Well, Skillshare is the perfect place to do that. I've used Skillshare to learn about writing, to learn about research, to learn about color theory. But as someone with ADHD, what I'm really excited for is this class by Thomas Frank. It's called Real Productivities: How to Build Habits That Last. And if you go to the link here in the video or down in the description, you can sign up and you get 2 free months if you use my link of the premium service. And if you do that, you actually help Step Back quite a bit. Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. All right, so let's talk about single-payer healthcare. The one that Bernie Sanders is pushing, the one that I'm going to make the case for you right this minute. First things first, it takes the figure of money and the driving of profits out of the healthcare service, so that the things that your doctor and the things you're prescribed and the tests you take are driven by medical need, not by needs to drive up profits and ring some bills. The United States actually has a shockingly high amount of unnecessary tests and unnecessary procedures because they're trying to wring more money out of every individual client. And one common complaint that comes up about public healthcare systems in the US, which always baffles me, is about wait times, which is rich because actually comparisons show that the United States has a wait time about on par with other countries with public healthcare systems. But because of how the healthcare system works, there's still a line. Like, the same amount of people still need medicine and procedures and all sorts of stuff. It's just that rich people get to move to the front, while poor people have to wait until it gets so bad they're going to the emergency room. It's also a universal program, so everyone from the richest person in America to the poorest person in America gets the exact same healthcare. But on top of that, they're all part of the exact same program. And many programs that are universal are much harder to take away. Say Social Security, which they couldn't get rid of no matter how hard Joe Biden tries to act for it. So, and having it as a universal system means it's likely not to become a target for destruction. Yeah, a Republican might make a 2-tier system or might make it crappier or might make cuts, but it's very unlikely they're going to just remove the program altogether. That very rarely ever happens with universal systems. And because people won't be afraid to go to the doctor before they're having life-threatening illnesses and they have to go to the ER, it means that a lot of diseases and a lot of illness can be caught early enough that it doesn't actually require expensive procedures in order to do. All right, just because it would be a better system doesn't mean it would be a cheaper system, right? At the last debate, Bernie Sanders was attacked over and over again for how would you pay for a universal healthcare system, despite the fact that, no one asked that about war, but whatever, I guess we just don't ask those questions. But one thing that Bernie Sanders doesn't bring up enough is that a public healthcare system would, in fact, save the government a lot of money, and on top of that, would grow the economy. I know, that sounds completely bizarro, but hear me out. One of the reasons why healthcare is so expensive is because hospitals will charge, like say for the same broken arm, somebody with insurance a lot more than someone who's on a cheaper program. Say it's just like Medicare or something like that, or Medicaid. The reason is because of bargaining power. If I represent a giant program like Medicare or Medicaid that has literally millions of people in it, you're able to negotiate way better prices with hospitals, with medical supplies, with medicine, with all sorts of things if you have a large base, because no one wants to give up a really big, juicy government contract. Many businesses will give some pretty steep discounts if they know that they are signing themselves up for a lot of customers, and that lacking this business might put them, on the path to bankruptcy. In America today, there are lots of small health insurance companies that don't have nearly as many people as a Medicare system that covers the entire country would have. And so they have to negotiate as well with the same companies and very often get way worse prices for it. This is one of those situations where the economy of scale works very well. And one of the most common attacks that people get about the United States, about why it couldn't have a public healthcare system, is because the country just has too many people. There's 300 million people in the United States. It's the third most populous country on earth. How would you do it? And the thing you have to say to that is that really, the more people you could get under the power of one public healthcare system, the better prices you'd be able to get, because you'd be speaking literally for the power of 300 million people. Another thing that the United States could do is just buy the means of production and make its own medical supplies or medicines, which would take out the aspect of public-private partnerships, so that you no longer need to drive profits up to make artificial limbs and things like that, because you're making it for the purpose of helping people rather than making profit. You notice that when the profit motive is involved, you need to not just make enough to cover yourself, you need to make enough to pay for yourself and like a little bit for the wages of all the people who are actually doing all the work. The private system in the United States has a lot of middlemen who need to get paid, and oftentimes paid very well. And if you made a public system, all of that would disappear, which would make the cost of healthcare go way down. On top of that, there's actually even a capitalist argument for public healthcare, because it would help businesses. Not only would it be easier to start a small business because you don't have to worry about health insurance or the health insurance of your employees, but large businesses would be happy as well. I live in Southern Ontario. Southern Ontario, at least at one point, had a lot of car factories in them. The reason is they all came over from Detroit. Why'd they do that? Well, Ford doesn't have to pay for health insurance for all the employees here in Southern Ontario. So if you want a way to have strong, high-paying jobs in the United States, one way that you could do that is to make it so that having strong, high-paying jobs with benefits doesn't require buying expensive healthcare plans. The other thing is that a lot of the things that a private healthcare system needs to function involves shopping around and competitive prices, which doesn't really work for healthcare, because healthcare is an inelastic demand. If you're stabbed and bleeding out or unconscious, you're not going to be able to shop around for the best hospital. And even then, if your child has leukemia, what does it say about you going to the cheapest hospital? You're going to want to get them in the best hospital, are you not? And in these situations, when there's inelastic demand, like with healthcare, like with farming to an extent, and even with housing, it makes for these predatory private systems. And really, they're just not things that should exist in the capitalist system. I mean, the entire capitalist system shouldn't exist, blah, blah, blah. We'll deal with that another time. And because of the amount of money that these corporations have been paid to run this really predatory healthcare system, they're so fat with money that they use it to basically foster political corruption and further the gap between what America has for healthcare and what they need. This is why arguably three of four of the presidential candidates really can't give it up. They don't want to lose that sweet, sweet lobbyist money. And politicians with the laws in the books right now know where their bread is buttered, and so they're going to be resistant to it. So it's going to be a tough fight. But yes, with all this money going around, with all of this government expenditure, it really sucks to think about how we would pay for it, because really how they'd pay for it is by getting rid of all of this wasteful infrastructure of trying to give CEOs big fat stacks of cash. But really, this is about justice. Having a public healthcare system would make life in the United States better for everybody in the United States. The rest of the world's already done it. It's time, America. It's time you finally did it. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like this series I did on the top contenders in the Democratic primaries, which you can watch here somewhere, and that playlist is good. It's a little outdated now. I made it near the beginning of the race, and some of those candidates have either dropped out or changed a lot. Elizabeth Warren. And if you want to help the channel out to keep, the lights on, the cats fed and everything, you can check out this video's sponsor, Skillshare. That would really help. Or you can buy a Step Back t-shirt over at Teespring, link in the description for that. Or lastly, you can be one of the awesome patrons that are on the screen right now. They are saints. They are literally the reason I'm able to make Step Back videos as my full-time job, and you have no idea how much I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, and come back next time for more Step Back.